When you're thinking about businesses to invest in, what do you look for um, in those companies to ultimately that you think are going to be successful and generate a return?
Yeah, right. Wow, loaded question. I would say there's a few different things that we like to look at we always like to start with the people, right? Who is the team that we're working with? How involved are they? We always talk about the airport test. If you get stranded at the airport for 5 hours with them, could you guys hang out and have a good time? Could you deal with each other that long in a stressful situation? That is a major component, right? And I always think of the Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger quote, you can't do a good deal with a bad person. If
Mm-hmm.
there's an issue in terms of values and there's an issue in terms of just how we see the world, that's going to make for a really difficult investment situation for both sides, right? We just don't mesh, we don't bond together. You could have the perfect business, an incredible business that's generating a lot of cash, growing, but if we can't, make the people side of it work, it's probably going to be really hard for us to justify it in the first place. So that's one. Two is, a bit of it's a bit of a hard thing to explain, but we want to look for companies that, one, we just understand how the business works, right? It shouldn't be overcomplicated on how it makes money, on how you grow it. We should have a really clear understanding of, okay, here's how the business makes money, here's how they generate revenue, here's what the main costs are, and then in the drivers that impact the cost side of it. Can we generate a high enough margin where we're generating cash and able to reinvest in the company? Right? Like those like high level financial metrics is probably going to be two. And to go along with that, there are things, we wanted to have some type of what we'll call as like a moat, right? There has to be something that's differentiating it to the point where a person just picking it up off the street couldn't come become a competitor with you overnight, right? That could look a lot of different ways. You could have moats around a patent, or you could have moats around some type of trademark or copyright. It could be things like, hey, geography. We're the only ones in this space. We're the only ones in this geography. There just a lot of different ways that you can find that moat, and you can see that moat. The other thing I would say is customer concentration is really big for us. If you're generating $100 million and it's with one customer, that's really risky. If you lose that customer, the business basically disappears overnight. If that same $100 million is spread across, call it 100, 200 customers, okay. If you lose one of those, that's not the end of the world. Um, that's not going to fundamentally change the company's operating performance, overnight like that. So definitely having diversity in a customer base. Those are just things right off the bat that we're going to look at, and then you'll obviously really dig into the weeds on it of just, how much pending litigation, if any, is there with the company? Can we understand the financials? Are they doing accurate, bookkeeping, record keeping? You'll find, there's just some of these mom and pop businesses have, they've been a little lax on the record keeping. That's okay. That's not the end of the world for us. But if there's things going on below there that you can't really justify, again, that becomes really difficult for us to make an investment decision off of. So that's us in a high level. I mean, the best way I would summarize it is like, do you have customers that are really passionate about your product, that, they find you guys reliable, you do what you say you're going to do, and it's in a space that is growing, and is starting, just to get traction and continue to build off itself. That's usually a really good recipe for success.